I mean, I miss I miss variation. I mean, you certainly don't miss the hot, humid days, but in Dallas, it's 98 to 103 from July through September.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've lived here I can't really say miss because I've lived here since 1986. But I mean, Pittsburgh's always home.
Yeah.
And I always enjoy going back and going to the law school and going for my runs and going to the old restaurants and doing all those things. So,
yeah,
I mean, it's home.
Yeah.
It's saying we're live. Let's see.
Looks like we're live. All right.
Let me. Yes, we are live. Okay.
Right. Sounds great. So everybody missed the big reveal about what you and I have in common. Growing up in Pittsburgh during the golden years of sports, but yeah. So Brian and I spent some time while we were having tech difficulties reminiscing about the Pirates and the Steelers and the Penguins, and a pretty good time to grow up in Pittsburgh, gotta say that.
It was. Yes, it was. It's and I guess, people would say it's still a good time to grow up in Pittsburgh, but it's just a different Pittsburgh.
It's a different Pittsburgh, absolutely. And you can breathe better now than we could.
You can breathe better. They have, I mean, back in my day, the North Shore you would know there was no North Shore. We had Three River Stadium and Civic Arena, and you didn't have.
I miss that, man. I miss the.
Now they have a casino and you have all the different things, but a lot of the old style things that I remember going, Froggies is gone.
Yep.
So a lot of those things, very few remnants.
Yep.
So that's when I go back, that's what I kind of focus on. I'll drive by where I grew up in Scott Township and look at the house and where I used to play Little League Baseball and things like that. It's funny. I live walking distance from the elementary school that I went to.
Oh,
wow. My mom still lives there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a different experience. So you walk over there and you're walking around the baseball field. You're not some 16-year-old kid. You're some 50-something-year-old man thinking, are people going to think I'm a pedophile? Right? So when you're really just reminiscing about the old days. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to do a brief introduction. I am Cynthia Bulik. I am the founding director of the UNC Center of Excellence for Eating Disorders and the principal investigator of EDGI, the Eating Disorders Genetics Initiative. And as you've already heard, I too am a Pittsburgher and am very pleased to welcome a fellow Pittsburgher, Brian Cuban, to EDGI Talk today. And Brian is an attorney. He is a mental health advocate. He is an author. I'm told he is also a budding novelist, in addition to the other books that he has written. And today he is going to help us bust some myths about body image and eating disorders in men. So Brian, with that, please take a minute and introduce yourself and welcome to the talk.
Well, it's great to be here. As you had mentioned, that I am in long-term recovery from bulimia, traditional binging and purging, and exercise bulimia, which for those who don't know is obsessive compulsive exercise for the primary purpose of offsetting calories, in addition to cocaine addiction and problem drinking. And I have been in recovery. I struggled with all of those issues for over 2 decades. And I have been in recovery since April of 2007. I grew up in Pittsburgh. I'm the middle of 3 boys. I have a younger brother, Jeff. People may know my older brother, Mark, the Shark Tank and the Mavs. And every day, especially, and interestingly, I often get asked, Cynthia, what my greatest struggle in recovery is. It's my eating disorders. It really is. And we can talk about why that is. But cocaine.
Let's do that. Why don't we dive right in there? Because you've battled some big ones. You've battled cocaine, and saying that eating disorders was harder. What was it that made it tougher than even cocaine? Well,
you can change your circles, right? You change your connections, so you're not out doing blow with people. Right. I got sober in 12-step, and Alcohol has become just background to me. I see no benefit to taking a drink, but what do I have to do every day?
And
Have
more
to
than
eat.
once, right? More than once a day. Yeah.
Yes, I have to eat.
Yeah.
And food can be a major trigger, not necessarily the traditional bulimia, but the exercise bulimia.
Mm.
The overwhelming obsessive compulsive feelings that I have to engage in excessive exercise to not feel guilty about what I've eaten.
What you've eaten. So that sort of calorie math thing.
Yes,
Calories in, calories out.
yes,
Let me ask you this. Do you still exercise
I do.
for
I
health?
do. I go for ride. I have an artificial hip, so I don't exercise like I used to.
Right.
But for a while before the lockdown, I was into spin, and
Mhm.
now I go for a run. And we have a cemetery close by. I go run in the cemetery, but not. I mean, I always have to be self-aware
Yeah.
of because I am still in therapy for really dealing with the guilt feelings of eating,
Mm.
and even in all these years in recovery, because it's how my mind is programmed, right? It's how my mind was programmed, dating back to a little boy when I was fat shamed and bullied and told that and made to understand, as a little boy understands it, that being heavy is shameful.
Yeah.
Being a quote unquote fat pig, as I was called, is shameful.
Yeah.
So the mind, the body doesn't forget, or the mind doesn't forget. The mind adjusts, the mind copes, the mind you build a toolbox, but it doesn't forget.
Right. And it sounds like that's really the piece that's had the longest tail for you
Absolutely,
of all of the struggles that you've had.
absolutely. The childhood programming has been a long process, because it's like dragging this angry little boy and hurt little boy on a tire, on a tractor trailer tire, over gravel on a chain through your entire life,
Yeah.
and just dragging him and never letting him know that it wasn't his fault and that he was loved and that it's okay to love himself. And when that little boy doesn't know that, middle-aged Brian doesn't know that.
Right.
And so I am just a huge believer in adverse childhood experiences as a potential driver of eating disorders and other types of substance use and mental health issues.
Let's dive right into that, because I mean, I do a lot of research on genetics and eating disorder. That EDGI, Eating Disorders Genetics Initiative, is only partly about genetics, because, at no point do we say that the environment isn't involved. In fact, it's the interaction of genes and environment that we're interested in. But I'm particularly interested in kids, and when you have a 7, 8, 9, 10, 12-year-old brain, how bullying affects that,
Absolutely.
and teasing. Can you just sort of put us in the mind of that?
Sure. Let me give you the context for all that.
Okay.
And I'll start out by making it crystal clear to everybody that I do not blame my parents for what I went through. Parents do not cause eating disorders. Parents do not cause do not cause addiction. I know you know it, but just in case anyone else doesn't, there is a difference between cause and correlation.
Yes.
Right? Correlation means it'll happen to some people and not happen to others.
Right.
But I was to give you the context. I was the middle of three boys. Mark was the oldest, and Jeff was the youngest. Mark was outgoing, the firstborn, entrepreneurial, selling this door to door, selling that door to door. I remember when he was barely old enough to drive, and being from Pittsburgh, you'll appreciate this. Our local newspaper went on strike. It was a printer strike in the early 70s when both papers shut down.
Yeah.
And so he and his buddies, barely old enough to drive, drove to Cleveland, bought the Cleveland plain dealer, drove them back to downtown Pittsburgh, and sold them on a street corner for twice what they paid for him.
Wow.
Who knew what he was going to be?
Clever.
And he became that. Yes. My younger brother, Jeff, was a jock, nationally ranked wrestler, good looking, beer parties, dates, the prom, all of the things that young Brian associated with love and acceptance. I wanted my first date. I wanted my first kiss. I wanted to hold a girl's hand. But unfortunately, I was classic middle child syndrome. I was shy. I was withdrawn. I trended towards isolation.
Mm.
And whether this is environmental or genetic, this is how it was.
Right.
And I internalized anything negative said about me and wore it like a skin tight suit. Unfortunately, I also had a difficult relationship with my mom. There was a lot of fat shaming. I would be eating Chef Boyardee ravioli. I would come home from school for lunch and eat Chef Boyardee ravioli out of the can. And my mom would come home and she sells real estate or sold real estate and see me doing that. And she would say to me, Brian, if you keep eating that way, you're going to be a fat pig. Now, these were the things her mom said to her.
Right.
These were the things my great grandmother said to my grandmother. We came from a we're Eastern European Jewish dysfunctional, it's a stereotype, but it was a dysfunctional circle around food.
Right.
And it's handed down, I don't blame my mom for that. She had her own mental health issues at a time where a young woman talking about any kind of mental health issue in those days could get you institutionalized. So your husband could put you away. Not that my father would do that, but that's the shame and the stigma of a young woman with a young mother with mental health issues back then.
Right. Right.
Can you hear what's going on in my background?
Nope.
Okay. So when we take that all into account and hearing these things, I began to eat more and more to quell the depression. And I became a bigger Brian and a bigger Brian and an obese Brian. And as so often happens when kids change for what other kids perceive in the negative in school, the bullying started.
Mm.
The fat pig, you need to go to Sears and Roebuck to get a bra for your man boobs. And I developed a very self-deprecating sense of humor that became this. That was my wall of protection. I didn't want them to know how bad that hurt. And it all culminated one day in what I call the day of the gold pants. My brother Mark gave me a pair of shiny gold satin bell-bottom disco pants. I know. Whoever seen it?
I can see them, Brian.
Saturday Night Fever, John Travolta, Saturday Night Fever. Imagine John Travolta in those pants and imagine 260-pound Brian in those pants. No, I had to jump up and down, spray the water bottle. My butt looked like 15 cats back there, but I didn't care because I love my brother.
You love those pants, yeah.
I love those pants and I was going to wear them and get them on. And the kids made fun of them. One day I'm walking home from school with these kids who were in my mind the popular kids, the prom queens, the football stars. You have to remember this was before Al Gore invented the internet, right?
Right.
We didn't have any of that stuff. And I'm back then going viral meant 15 kids in the lunchroom knew about something.
Yeah, exactly.
But they start making fun of my pants. They start pulling at them. They start tearing at them and they physically assaulted me.
I was going to say, that's assault.
Yes, they physically assaulted me. If that happened today, it would be on YouTube with 15 million views. But this was then, right? And they threw the pants out in the street, the shreds, down to my Fruit of the Loom tighty whities, my Ked shoes, my tube socks. Yes, this was the 70s. My Pittsburgh Pirates t-shirt. They went on laughing and giggling like they had done the funniest thing ever.
God.
I went out in the street and I gathered up the shreds, put them over my privates, and I waddled home. People gawked, no one stopped. I got home, I went in the basement and put them in the bottom of the garbage, hoping that no one would ever talk about it. My brother wouldn't ask about it. My parents wouldn't ask about it. And I would just forget about it. But the body remembers trauma too.
Tough.
And the body carries trauma.
Yeah.
And let me tell you how the body carries trauma. I can go to that spot in Pittsburgh, PA, outside of Mount Lebanon today and show you exactly where it happened. Exactly.
Yep.
That is how traumatic what that was. And that was the beginning of that suitcase of trauma that in the fat shaming and this, that I began dragging through my entire life without ever opening it. And it just kept filling and filling and filling. So as you might have, so that was the trauma. That was the major trauma, the words and the actions.
Yeah.
And I'm going to circle back again because I know people are sensitive about it. It's not my mother's fault. She was repeating cycles
Right.
that were done to her. She had a very verbally and mentally abusive relationship with her bipolar mother. Very abusive.
Yeah.
And so this is what it was.
Right. You know, Brian, you're old enough to think about it this way with me. And I think about traumas like that in terms of vinyl records. Remember like your favorite song, your gold pants, if it were a song, and all of a sudden you get a scratch in your record right on that favorite song, right? That scratch doesn't go away.
No, and
Every time you play that song again, you hear that.
Or it just stops there, right? The record just stops there. Bleep, 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 bleep.
Exactly.
And you're stuck in it. And so what happens is you're stuck in a negative thought loop.
Right.
Not old enough to know, as we learn in eating disorder recovery, that our thoughts are not facts.
Right. Exactly.
And
actually,
so,
let's do that. I've heard you say, and I love when you say this, that you are not your thoughts. Can we go there for a minute and just tell me, that's one of your tools that I think you talk about really eloquently, and I think people can really benefit from hearing about that.
Sure. Me refreshing the John Hopkins COVID stats every 5 minutes, watching them increase, thinking I will be stuck in my house until January 1st is not a fact. It's a thought. That's an example.
And when you pull that apart, how does that make you feel better when you can label it that way?
Well, you have to be able, it allows you, when you're stuck in the middle of a negative thought loop, it becomes very difficult to step back from it, right? Because it just keeps playing on itself as an obsessive compulsive buildup. And so I have a toolbox. I am in therapy. I talk to my therapist. I have my wife. I have my compassionate community, which is very important. Connection, connection, connection. Those are the things that help me draw on the self-awareness that I sometimes forget I have because I'm stuck in the thought.
Yeah.
And pull back from it and say, wait a minute, take a breath, take a breather, breathe, Brian, breathe. This is what's going on today.
Yeah.
Whatever you think is going on tomorrow is not a fact.
Right.
It is a thought.
A thought. Yeah.
And I read recently, and I don't have the stats of this, that over 50% of our thoughts are negative.
Oh, I believe that. And now probably more, actually. Right now, I think we're probably up even higher than that.
And so when you're in the middle of it, that 50% can consume your entire day.
Yeah. And
that is when it becomes a trigger to relapse.
Yes.
I'll just go out and run for 5 hours. I'll just go do this. I'll just do that. I can binge and purge. I can do that, all those things. And so having the toolbox and the coping tools that I've developed has been very important. And that has been acceptance and commitment therapy. That has been cognitive behavioral therapy. I have not done EMDR. I know people ask about that. I've done role-playing therapy, exposure therapy, because I also deal with body dysmorphic disorder. So there are a lot of things in my toolbox. I just have to be able to, understand they're there and pull the right one out.
At the time, yeah. And that actually, I've been hearing some ACT and some CBT language coming when you talk about your recovery, which is wonderful in my mind, because those are exactly the tools that we know can be effective.
Yes, ACT has been very important to me because you have to remember, and you specialize in part of this, I'm 59 years old. I'm a 59-year-old guy in recovery from two eating disorders. So what does recovery look like to me? Right? Not what it looks like to you.
Right.
Not what it looks like to the 18-year-old dealing with anorexia, the 18-year-old dealing with bulimia. What does it look like to me?
So answer that question for us. What does recovery look like for you?
What does recovery look like to me? That I am behavior free, that I am not obsessed with exercise, and that I am on a daily basis doing the next right thing to lead my best life.
Yeah. I mean, that's beautiful. I mean, that's, and it's not like, I think so many people think that recovery is a line and you cross it and then you're fine. But
Yes.
recovery is work.
And you have to remember, and especially for me at 59, there's a baseline. Okay. You're getting to a point where, okay, I would be disingenuous to say I don't have negative thoughts about eating disorders.
Right.
I
Right.
do. That's where I am. And so I have this many years left in my life. Are they, I think, and this is part of ACT, which of these thoughts are destructive? Which of these thoughts can be dealt with through coping mechanisms? And I go through that, and that's part of ACT.
Yeah. Right. And the thoughts don't go away. Your response to them changes
That's
with
right.
your tools. Yeah.
That's right.
We have a question from someone who's listening out there. And they said, Brian, was it a lonely experience to share your eating disorder story, considering the stigma surrounding males and eating disorders?
Lonely? No. Scary? Yes.
Explain.
But there's a story there. Back in, I went public with my eating disorder struggle before I even told my psychiatrist. I was, and it still may be on my blog. I was going through a Sports Illustrated and came across an article about model, or maybe it was a People magazine, and came across an article about model Caroline Reston.
Okay.
And she was a Brazilian model who died of complications related to anorexia. And I looked at the comments, and there were comments from men. And at that time, and here I'm in my 40s, I'm a lawyer. I don't think I'm a stupid person, but the stigma was so great. I thought I was the only person dealing with this, and shame of it. That is how overwhelming the stigma of eating disorders can be for a guy or a girl, for a woman or a male or trans or whatever your set orientation is, right? On that spectrum. You think you're the only one, and you could have a PhD, you could have an MD, a JD. That is how powerful stigma is. And so I'm reading this, and I said, okay, I'm just going to put it out there. I'm just going to put it out there. Not even my family knew of my struggles. I was very good at hiding it. I mean, you go to the bathroom, right? You turn on the faucets, and I don't want to get too specific, but that's you've camouflaged.
Camouflage.
You get good at camouflaging. But and so I was very good at that. And plus I was living away from home in college, and it just becomes easy to hide, but it becomes a survival mechanism.
Right.
So I decided I was going to write a blog about, and it wasn't a long one, my struggle with bulimia. And it was, I won't say it was lonely, but it was scary. And it was clearly not lonely when and this was in the early days of blogging, so there wasn't a ton of support, but there was support and there was no criticism. And I thought, wow, okay, I'm going to explore this even more. And it was beyond bulimia. For those who don't understand, can I talk a little bit about BDD?
Sure, please. Yeah.
So I'm afflicted with body dysmorphic disorder. I mean, and I'll call it BDD from here on out. And what BDD is, from a layman's standpoint, is when a person takes a small or even maybe non-existent perceived defect in their appearance and exaggerates it in their perceived reflection to the point that it impacts their ability to function, quote unquote, normally in life. For some people, it may be a blemish. They never leave the house. I abused plastic surgery, liposuction, this and that, hair transplants, all of it until I had no credit left. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw, no matter how thin I got from my restriction at Penn State, I saw this huge stomach. Not a visual delusion, but an overwhelming obsessive compulsive feeling that it's there. And then I transitioned into, for the lack of a better term, steroid abuse. I hate the term abuse, but steroid abuse, steroid addiction. And I got huge. I got monstrous. But every time I looked in the mirror, there was this stomach. And so in the core of was the body dysmorphic disorder And I went through this behavior wheel, cycling instinctively through all these destructive behaviors, trying to change my reflection in the mirror that never changed.
Yep. Yep. That actually, I had a question I wanted to ask you, and you don't have to be a spokesperson for all the men in the world, but it's sort of my crusade to bust myths, right? And there's this belief, Brian, that, women, when they look in the mirror, they never like what they see. And we talk about it with each other. It's almost like a badge of honor to say, oh, I'm so fat, or I see this, or I hate my hips, I hate my whatever. There's, I think, a false belief that men don't have that. That men, no matter what their size or shape, they look in the mirror and they're like, I look hot, I look great.
Yeah.
You're saying that's not the case.
It is not, and that's a great segue into this. We have to distinguish between normative discontent and body image dysfunction. There is not a person in the industrialized world who doesn't look in the mirror one day or another, or the car window or the mall window, and say, man, that just sucks.
Any gender.
It doesn't matter. That's normative discontent. That's part of the human condition of the industrialized world, right? Your pants are a little tighter, or this or that. But when you don't leave the house, when you spend tens of thousands of dollars on plastic surgery, when you engage in, when you binge and purge, when you restrict as a result of that, that's when it is a disorder. Right. But so we have to, normative discontent is not a disorder.
Right.
It is what we all experience.
Right.
And men experience it like anyone else. Body dysmorphic disorder affects about 2% of the population, men and women equally.
Yes.
And it is not an eating disorder.
Right. It's a different category.
It is in the category of obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yeah. No, and you, in your case, there was a connection between.
Yes, there was a connection, and it correlates. But BDD correlates with all number of dysfunction. Strong correlation with eating disorders. Very strong correlation with steroid addiction.
Yes.
A strong correlation with suicide.
Yes.
I came close to taking my own life in 2005. I was very lucky.
Yeah.
I've been to a psychiatric hospital twice.
Right.
And so, yes, body dysmorphic disorder has a strong correlation with many types of destructive dysfunction.
Men need help, but don't always ask for it. Do you have any wise words that you can share with men or boys out there, or really anyone who is suffering from an eating disorder or suffering from BDD?
Sure.
And hasn't reached out for help? What should we do?
It's hard. The scariest thing to do, I can speak anecdotally from my personal viewpoint. What was scary to me? The scariest thing for me was that I was going to go on the internet and find that no one else was suffering from this. And I was the only one, and I'm a freak, right? No one else. Email me. I'll guide you. I'll give you my experience. Go online and go into online support groups where you can call yourself Roberto Clemente, and you don't have to, and you don't have to out yourself to anyone. I get emails from young men all the time. Go search it out. Go search it out, because treatment for BDD or eating disorders, the first step, obviously, like anything, has to start with one of the stages, the contemplation stage of change, right? Go from pre-contemplation or no to contemplation. Okay, something's going on. When you're in that contemplation stage, reach out and find out, get that support from other people. You come to me. And if I can't help you, I'll find someone else who can. There are plenty of people out there who want to support you. There are plenty of people out there who love you. And you may not think that, but you have a compassion wheel, I'm sure, of people you have just been, and I'm generalizing here, but maybe there's a compassion wheel around the people around you who you have just projected out that they're going to think you're a freak, and they won't understand. They'll say, just eat more. It's all in your head. It's all in your head. Now, maybe
Someone
I
might,
mean,
yeah.
we see that,
Yeah.
and that's unfortunate. But you'll never know what someone is thinking or whether they want to help you if you always project out the worst possible result to shut yourself up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think first off, that's a beautiful offer for inviting people to reach out. And second off, that might be one of those unexpected benefits of this strange situation we're finding ourselves in right now.
It is.
There
And
are all these online resources, and you don't have to come out with your real name. You don't have to show up in a therapist's office in person.
no.
You know, you
And
can
then
get
once
online
we
help.
know, once you're in the contemplation stage, and that's important to do it when you're in that stage. There are 5 stages, but we'll just talk about contemplation because people go back to pre-contemplation. I'm not telling anyone.
Right.
So when you're in there, take action, reach
Right.
out,
Do it.
and then we can start looking at all the different roads, the treatment, this, that, therapy, whatever you think based on your life and your lens, because your lens is not my lens. Your recovery is not my recovery, but I can give you the benefit of what worked for me. It may not work for you. And what other people who have been through it can also do is say, here are the paths that I've found. And you can look at those paths and say, okay, this one sucks, this one sucks, this one sucks.
Yeah.
You know what? I might be willing to try this one.
Right.
And then you get to the next stage of change if you're willing.
Right. Yeah. No.
Because no one can make you do. And we know that, I mean, we know what the mortality rate is here. It's awful. No one can make you do what you don't want to do, but the roadways can be laid, the pathways can be laid.
So another question that came through from one of our listeners, watchers, was the extent to which eating disorders look different in men and in women.
Look different. I mean, I don't know that I'm competent to answer that because I'm not a woman and I'm not a therapist.
Yeah.
So that would be very difficult for me. We're a lot, and I know that we experience them differently, but I can tell you that traditional purging is traditional purging,
Yep.
and exercise bulimia is exercise bulimia.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the term for drunkorexia now? What's the clinical term?
I think we coined something was FRAC, but I can't remember what it stands for.
I went through that in law school, where
Right.
I drank all of my calories to get drunk easier, so I didn't have to eat, and I could binge and purge, and I could purge easier. The behaviors look the same.
Right.
How we experience them, I do not believe I am competent to talk about how a different someone other than myself experiences an eating disorder.
And I will even add to that from like my researcher and therapist hats. We need to know more because there haven't been enough men who have come out and talked about what it's like to have an eating disorder as a man. That's why we're doing this talk so that we can get more.
And it's distressing. I see people. I saw one guy, a great guy, come out, and he was well known, and suddenly dropped off. Another person. I don't know where the guys are talking about it. We need to talk.
Yeah.
We need to talk. You don't have to have a famous last name. Just get out there and tell your story.
Right, please.
And if you're not ready to tell your story publicly, tell it to someone privately.
Exactly. And tell us also, because, you know, like this EDGI study, go up to edgi.org. One of the things that I struggle with is getting men to participate in research. And I can't continue to tell the story about what eating disorders in men look like.
Raise his hand. I participated.
Yay,
Raise
Brian.
his hand, everybody, for everyone. I participated. You can too.
Thank you, Brian. But that's what we need, because I don't even know if the same genes are operative in women and in men. And that's part of what my goal is, to figure that out.
Yeah. And I have no history in my family.
Right.
And so it's just a weird deal. And it was a tough deal for me. It really was. But here I am. And so it's such a cliche. It's the cliche of cliches, but recovery is possible.
I think that's a mantra. That's not a cliche. I think those are words to live by.
Even if you don't believe it in the middle of it. No, it's not for me. No, it's not for me. I get it. And I've heard it. It's you don't know. You're privileged. You're right. I would be disingenuous I would be completely disingenuous to not acknowledge that I went through my eating disorder and recovery in white privilege. I absolutely, I had all the resources if I wanted to take them. I had health insurance. I have a wealthy brother who was willing to do anything for me. Yes,
Yeah.
that is true.
Yeah.
Recovery, there may not be discrimination in the disorder, but recovery does discriminate based on privilege.
And that is going to be one of our next topics and one of our future EDGI talks, access to care in this country. So stay tuned for that one. I'm just going to let people know and invite them to follow us on all of the social media at EDGI Study, EDGI Study, and take a look at edgi.org. See what the study's all about. See if the study's for you. And we're going to be announcing some more EDGI talks soon. And access of care is actually right up there in my top priority topics for us to discuss. But Brian, you know, this is your hour. And you know, you're a myth buster. You know, you try to get the truth out there about eating disorders. Any other misconceptions or anything else that you want to add for our listeners today?
Well, one, I think people should know I've never been to eating disorder treatment. I didn't know it existed. I had no idea it existed. I would have gone if I knew it was there. And so that's people wonder about that. I did the white knuckle on my own, but I was in therapy, right? I've been in therapy, so
yeah.
I won't say completely white knuckle, but I think, what is it? Only 1 in 10 males get treatment.
Yep.
So we have to we have to acknowledge that. And the myth, you know what? Let's bust the myth that there is no treatment out there available for males.
Yeah.
There are no beds. That's not true.
Not true.
That is not true. There are beds.
Yeah.
And there is good treatment. And I'm not going to give platforms to any specific facility, but there are treatments. There are beds for men. But again, you have to be in that contemplation stage of change and do your research. And I know you know who the players are. I know who the players are. If you don't know who the players are, what did I say before? Get out there and don't be afraid and find out. Right? Everyone has their, you know, there are different schools of thoughts, and there are plenty of resources on the internet. And again, I'm not going to give anyone a specific platform, but there are plenty of educational resources on the internet. And if you fit the bill, please take the study. Take the study. We have to, the money spent on eating disorder recovery and eating disorder treatment is shameful. It is absolutely shameful. And it is such a small part of being part of the solution to, if you fit the profile, participate in the study. So go to the website and participate. It is this much trouble. There is absolutely no reason to do it, none.
Thanks for the plug, Brian. I think that's great. And that's exactly what we want to have happen. We want to understand eating disorders in men as well as we understand eating disorders in women. And I'm not saying we understand them that well yet. So we really have to just enrich our understanding of the biology of eating disorders, but also of the psychology and the social parts. As you made so clear to us, those environmental factors are so important. Teasing, bullying, trauma, all of those things. Lots of people get bullied and get teased, but never develop an eating disorder.
That's right. That's why it's correlation.
And it's also why genetics is so important, because it might help us understand why some of us are more vulnerable to those things than other people.
Sure. And it's interesting. I think back then, my eating disorder started at Penn State as restriction. I guess it would have been, I know the term doesn't exist now, but I guess it would have been back then EDNOS.
EDNOS, yeah. Now it's OSFED. Yeah,
OSFED, yeah. So, but my eating disorder started as severe restriction.
Right.
And transitioned into bulimia.
Yep. Yeah, as so many people do. It's been great talking to you again, Brian.
Yes, it has been. It has been. And I hope to see you in person again in the future and talk some more Pittsburgh.
I was going to say, yep, up in Pittsburgh, down in Dallas, somewhere.
That's right. Well,
thank you so much for joining us today.
As always, if there's anything I can do for you, and let me know. And to your listeners, take the freaking study. Thank you.
Take care.
Oh,
Bye-bye,
wait, we
Brian.
have one more question.
Oh, one more question.
Where-
Ooh. What do
I
we
guess-
got? Oh, I think I got it here. Let's see. Oh, this is a really interesting question, actually. They're talking about the intuitive eating and health at every size paradigm, which seems to be more effective for females than for males. I have absolutely no information on the health at every size community and whether that approach is effective for males or not. Do you know anything, Brian?
I do not. Anything I say would be from anecdotal
Yeah.
observation that there is a lot more of a shaming aspect to it for females than for males.
Yeah.
I mean, from a male standpoint, you always health at any size always seems to flip into some kind of dad bod or this or that, and I don't think men get shamed as much
Right.
in terms of health at any size, though I truly believe it.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, we'll put that on the to look at list for future EDGI Talk. Maybe have
Yeah,
another
I don't have enough personal experience and certainly no
Yeah.
clinical experience
Right.
to be able to answer that other than what I see in terms of the shaming aspect of, I've certainly seen body activists, health at any size, and get shamed by men and women.
Right. All right.
On Instagram.
Yep.
And I see that a lot less with men.
Right. All right. We're going to put that on future topics to discuss. All right. One more
All
time.
right, thanks everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.